Palestinians are describing the start of aid distribution by the US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation as chaotic and frustrating. At a distribution point in central Gaza on Thursday, Abu Eid Abu Raqba told Reuters he found that the, quote, process was chaos, asking, quote, who is in charge of this? The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or GHF, a private group backed by the United States and endorsed by Israel, began operations this week. The rollout has seen distribution sites overwhelmed by Palestinians seeking desperately needed supplies. Some, like Mohammed Isa, arrived only to leave empty-handed.
It is frustrating. I have 21 people. If I need a kilogram of flour, it is for 100 shekels. We can't buy it. They said there is aid, so we came running. I can't even walk, and when I came, they told me there is nothing left. Some have carts carrying boxes, and one cannot get 1 kilogram of flour or a bottle of oil. This is not right. I feel frustrated. What is this? This is chaos. Chaos.
The start of GHF's operation has raised international pressure on Israel to get more food in and halt the fighting in Gaza. The new system has been heavily criticized by the United Nations and other aid groups as an inadequate and flawed response to the humanitarian crisis left by Israel's 11-week blockade on aid entering Gaza. Video from Tuesday showed thousands of people rushing fences in Rafah, forcing private security contractors to retreat. On Thursday, GHF said it had opened a third distribution hub and had so far supplied a total of just over 1.8 million meals. More sites are due to be opened in the coming weeks. Israel imposed the blockade at the beginning of March, saying supplies were being stolen by Hamas and used to entrench its control over Gaza. Hamas denies stealing aid and says it has protected aid trucks from looters. Even as thousands made their way to distribution sites, Israeli jets continue to pound areas of Gaza. Palestinian medical workers said at least 45 people were killed on Thursday, including 23 people in a strike on the Barej camp in the central Gaza Strip.
Israel's government has approved 22 new Jewish settlements in the occupied West Bank, despite its allies' threat of sanctions. Far-right Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, who pushes for Israeli sovereignty over the West Bank, wrote on X on Thursday that the new settlements would be located in the northern West Bank, without specifying where. A growing number of European countries are demanding that Israel end the war in Gaza, and Britain, France and Canada this month warned Israel they could impose targeted sanctions if it continued to expand settlements in the West Bank. Palestinian residents of Al-Murayya, near Ramallah in the West Bank, accused settlers of attacking their village and burning their crops on Wednesday, part of a rise in settler attacks targeting Palestinian residents. In Kariut, near Nablus earlier this week, Palestinians said settlers threw stones at houses and burned cars. Our houses are not safe anymore, this resident says. Settlement activity in the West Bank has accelerated sharply since the war in Gaza, now in its 20th month, adding to escalating Israeli military operations against Palestinian militants. Israeli media cited the defense ministry as saying that among the new Jewish settlements were existing outposts that would be legalized and entirely new settlements. Around 700,000 Israeli settlers live among 2.7 million Palestinians in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, territories Israel captured in the 1967 war. Israel later annexed East Jerusalem, a move not recognized by most countries. But it has not formally extended sovereignty over the West Bank.
A federal judge said on Thursday that she will issue an order that continues to block President Donald Trump's effort to stop Harvard University from enrolling international students. The move comes after the Boston judge granted a temporary restraining order, which she said would remain in effect while lawyers for both sides negotiate over the terms of the injunction. Harvard student Kevin Donahue was outside the courthouse during Thursday's hearing.
I think it was clear that the judge was sympathetic to the concerns that international students are suffering harm and may suffer harm from the government's attempts to kick them out. But one thing that struck me was that even with the order being issued, there's some harm that's being done just by the process itself and the uncertainty.
The judge's decision came shortly after the Trump administration revealed it plans to pursue a new, lengthier administrative process to block the students' enrollment. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security sent Harvard a notice late Wednesday night saying it would give the Ivy League school 30 days to submit evidence to contest its plans. The plans involve revoking Harvard's certification under a federal program, allowing it to enroll non-U.S. students. At the hearing, a Trump administration lawyer argued there was now no need for a court order blocking the administration's actions. But the judge said she believed a broad preliminary injunction protecting Harvard and students was necessary while that administrative process played out. Harvard argued the government had violated its First Amendment rights and said Trump is retaliating against it for refusing to agree to its demands to control the school's governance, curriculum, and ideology of its faculty and students. Trump on Wednesday said Harvard should have a cap on the number of foreign students it admits.
Number one, I think they should have a cap of maybe around 15%, not 31%. We have people who want to go to Harvard and other schools. They can't get in because we have foreign students there. But I want to make sure that the foreign students are people that can love our country.
Harvard filed the lawsuit a day after the Trump administration announced it was revoking the school's certification with the Student and Exchange Visitor Program. Harvard said the Trump administration's move to revoke its ability to enroll international students was, quote, devastating for the school and its student body. Harvard is also pursuing a separate lawsuit challenging Trump's decision to terminate nearly $3 billion in federal research funding.
Donald Trump has not been a fan of Fed Chief Jerome Powell.
I call him Too Late, Too Late Powell, that's his nickname.
On Thursday, he summoned Powell to the White House to tell him he's wrong to hold off on rate cuts. Both sides confirmed that the meeting happened at the president's invitation. In a statement afterwards, the Fed said Powell told the president that future monetary policy would depend entirely on economic data. White House spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt set out Trump's take.
The president and I both saw the statement that the Fed put out after the meeting. That statement is correct. However, the president did say that he believes the Fed chair is making a mistake by not lowering interest rates, which is putting us at an economic disadvantage to China and other countries. And the president's been very vocal about that, both publicly and now I can reveal privately as well.
Earlier this month, the Fed left rates unchanged, and bank officials have since signaled that policy could stay on hold for some months more, while they wait for clarity on the impact of tariffs. The Fed is concerned that trade turmoil could slow the economy, but also stoke inflation. That makes for a tough call on whether to raise or lower rates. Financial markets are currently pricing in a cut in September, with another to follow in December. Trump elevated Powell to Fed chair during his first term, but soon fell out with him over interest rates. In April, stocks tumbled amid market fears that the president could try to remove Powell from his post. Trump later denied ever having any such intention.
A U.S. appeals court on Thursday reinstated President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs, a day after a trade court ordered an immediate block on them. The Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit in Washington provided no opinion or reasoning for reinstating the tariffs. White House trade advisor Peter Navarro said that U.S. tariffs would remain in place for now.
The tariffs remain in place. The court told us, they didn't all but tell us, they told us, go do it another way. So you can assume that even if we lose, we will do it another way. And I can assure the American people that the Trump tariff agenda is alive, well, healthy, and will be implemented to protect you, to save your jobs and your factories, and to stop shipping foreign wealth, our wealth, into foreign hands.
My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day, waiting for a long time.
The trade court's ruling on Wednesday threatened to kill, or at least delay, the imposition of Trump's Liberation Day tariffs on most U.S. trading partners. But the White House said the ruling had not interfered with any negotiations with top trading partners that are scheduled in the days ahead. Wednesday's order to block Trump's tariffs had given financial markets a brief boost, but Thursday's turn of events left Wall Street with no clear direction. Analysts said broad uncertainty remains over the future of Trump's tariffs, which have cost companies more than $34 billion in lost sales and higher costs, according to a Reuters analysis.
Portugal's far-right Chega party won second place in the country's snap elections, making it the main opposition party for the first time Wednesday. A final tally by the country's interior ministry that included votes from abroad showed Chega gained 60 seats in the 230-seat single-chamber parliament, 2 more than the center-left socialists. Chega leader André Ventura founded the party just 6 years ago.
Chega swept the left bloc off the map in style.
It's a major shift in politics in Portugal, ending 5 decades of dominance by the 2 major parties, the ruling centre-right Democratic Alliance and the Socialist Party. Chega has allied with anti-immigration parties such as Marine Le Pen's National Rally in France and Germany's AfD. It has called for an end to open-doors immigration and tougher sentences for criminals, including chemical castration for repeat rapists. It has also accused the country's political establishment of corruption. Elections results Wednesday also showed the Democratic Alliance headed by Prime Minister Luis Montenegro won 91 seats. It's just short of a parliamentary majority, marking a similar outcome to the previous ballot in March 2024. Opinion polls show Portuguese voters are increasingly frustrated with political elites and elections that only extend a cycle of short-lived governments and legislative gridlock. Montenegro has refused to make deals with Chega and said he would form a new minority government.
South Korea's Big Snap election saw record numbers in early voting Thursday. The vote is a critical one for the U.S. ally. Voters will decide who leads the deeply polarized country after conservative Yoon Suk-yeol was removed from power. He was ousted after putting the country under martial law for 6 hours, leading to months of political chaos and massive protests. Now, Liberal Lee Jae-myung is the projected frontrunner to succeed Yoon. Lee narrowly lost to Yoon in 2022. He cast his ballot in Seoul on Thursday. If he wins, it could mark a major shift in South Korea on key policies. Whereas Yoon had gone all in on supporting Washington, taking a hard line on North Korea, and repairing ties with Japan, Lee has traditionally been more skeptical of the U.S. alliance. He has also vowed to engage with North Korea, and was harshly critical of Yoon's reconciliation with Japan. However, in an effort to win moderates, Lee has recently spoken more favorably of the U.S. alliance, and has said he would continue trilateral cooperation with Japan and the U.S. That is seen in Washington as essential to countering China and North Korea. Some in the U.S. wonder if Lee's pivot on a range of issues will last, and if his views might clash with U.S. President Donald Trump. Trump has slapped South Korea with tariffs and pressed it to pay more for the tens of thousands of U.S. troops stationed there. The last published Gallup Korea poll put Lee at 49% of public support, followed by Kim Moon-soo of the Conservative People Power Party with 35%, and the new Reform Party's Lee Jun-suk at 11%. Political experts have been critical of a hurried race they say has sidelined critical national debates. Until this week, most major candidates only released summaries of their pledges. Lee only put out his full policy booklet a day before early voting began. Here's the head of the Korean Association for Policy Studies, Park Hyun-jun, during a recent expert debate.
Voters should be able to assess how a pledge affects them personally and make choices accordingly. Something like, this candidate's policy will impact me in this way, so I'll vote for them. But we saw very little of that.
Reuters heard similar sentiments speaking to people on the streets of Seoul this week.
Personally, I'm placing more emphasis on changing the administration in this election. Still, I do wish they would present their pledges in a more detailed way.
Those criticisms do not appear to be keeping South Koreans from the ballot box, however. By 6 p.m. on Thursday, about 8.7 million people, nearly a fifth of total eligible voters, showed up to cast their votes, according to National Election Commission data. That is the highest turnout for this stage of a presidential poll, and several points higher than the vote in 2022. Voting next Tuesday on Election Day will run from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. An indication of the results is likely to start emerging that evening or early the next day.
Xiaomi rolled out its highly anticipated sports electric vehicle YU7 in Beijing on Thursday. Analysts see the car as a rival to Tesla's best-selling Model Y, and it could further challenge Elon Musk's company in the world's largest auto market. The firm, best known for smartphones and consumer electronics, will start taking orders for the EV in July. Xiaomi's hoping to repeat the success of the sporty SU7 sedan, which launched last year and has outsold Tesla's Model 3 on a monthly basis since December. Analysts have said while it could pose a major threat to Tesla's Y, the YU7's launch comes as Xiaomi's new EV orders have fallen. This sales dip follows a series of controversies, including a fatal highway crash in March involving an SU7 in driving assistance mode. Xiaomi has said that it'll announce the price of YU7 in July, but analysts estimate that it'll be at most around $45,900. Also predicting Xiaomi will ship 100,000 YU7 cars this year and almost 250,000 next year.
Shares of Nvidia jumped more than 6% in Thursday morning trading, a day after the AI bellwether reported a blockbuster 69% surge in quarterly sales. The higher-than-expected sales growth was driven by customers stockpiling AI chips ahead of U.S. export restrictions on China. The company, however, warned that the new curbs, which would stop Nvidia from selling its H20 chip made for the Chinese market, are expected to cut $8 billion from its current quarter sales. But the hit to chip sales was not as bad as feared, and Nvidia also talked up demand for its new Blackwell chips from customers including Microsoft. That was welcome news to investors, says Morningstar equity strategist Brian Colello.
Investors can breathe a sigh of relief that the China revenue impact is now known a bit better, and it's not as severe. Meanwhile, the Blackwell products and the transition to the newer Blackwell architecture is in full swing, better than anticipated, and there's still plenty of demand in developed markets and elsewhere. So NVIDIA is still in a tremendously strong position in AI in the markets it's allowed to serve. And with China, we'll see. Again, we're not necessarily betting on a China comeback, but that's pure upside if there is.
CEO Jensen Huang, on a conference call with analysts, said Nvidia was at risk of being cut off from China's massive AI developer base and argued that China's chip industry was sophisticated and closing in on the United States. But he praised U.S. President Donald Trump's recent move to rescind a so-called AI diffusion rule that would have regulated the flow of U.S. AI chips around the world. Despite the Chinese export restrictions, Nvidia forecasts sales of $45 billion, plus or minus 2%, in the second quarter, only slightly below analyst average estimates.
U.S. stocks finished higher Thursday, with the Dow gaining more than 0.25% and the S&P 500 and NASDAQ each rising about 0.4%. Investors digested a late afternoon court ruling that reinstated President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs, reversing a trade court decision from the previous day that had blocked them. Meanwhile, shares of Nvidia jumped more than 3% after the AI bellwether reported stronger than expected quarterly sales. Ben McMillan, chief investment officer at IDX Advisors, said Nvidia's results overshadowed the market's reaction to the latest tariff back and forth.
That's kind of been the story this entire year is, it's been tariff ping pong, for lack of a better term. And we saw, a lot of exuberance immediately after that court blocked it. Now there's news coming out today that, well, the White House is almost certainly going to challenge this. Also, there's still going to be tariffs in place. It's not like they, evaporated. If anything, I think the bigger story, honestly, is NVIDIA, with the beat that they had, and just the signal that sends for kind of broader strength and what has been the main growth sector for equities of recent.
In other company news, shares of Best Buy plunged more than 7% after the retailer lowered its annual sales and profit forecast amid concerns that U.S. tariffs would weigh on consumer demand for big-ticket items. Boeing rose more than 3% after its CEO said the plane maker aims to increase its production of its best-selling 737 MAX jets. On the economic front, the number of Americans filing new applications for jobless benefits increased more than expected, and the unemployment rate appeared to have picked up in May. And a second reading from the Commerce Department showed U.S. GDP contracted 0.2% in the first quarter. Economists polled by Reuters had forecast a 0.3% contraction.